Hello, aviators. Welcome to the Aviator's Guide, Novice to Pilot. I'm Holly Bellino, your host and your guide, if you'll let me, through your pilot journey. Summer is officially almost over, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm sure my fellow Texans are just as thrilled as I am to finally feel some cooler weather soon, start to see the leaves change colors, drink copious amounts of butterbeer as you watch Harry Potter movie marathons, and to have an excuse to eat all the pumpkin flavored treats. This past weekend, my husband and I had a once in a blue moon junk food adventure where we saw pumpkin flavored Pop Tarts. As you all know, Pop Tarts have a negative nutritional value, so it's hard for me to buy them, let alone eat them. But I just had to know, were these going to be as disgusting as they looked? Or would I enjoy them because I do like pumpkin? Well, I didn't spit it out, but they're not going to be featured in my daydreams anytime soon. It's safe to say our lives are unchanged, and my husband has confidently confirmed his hatred of all things pumpkin. In other non-Pop Tart related news, I will soon be having my first guest on the Aviator's Guide, an actual AME. If you've seen episode 2, then you might remember that AME stands for Aviation Medical Examiner. This is a person every pilot must see 1 to 2 times per year, depending on your age. So it makes sense that there are about 450,000 medical applications submitted every year, according to the FAA. 450,000 may not seem like a lot, but you have to remember, less than 1% of the 337 million people in the United States are pilots. This AME and I will be discussing some important and controversial topics in regards to the pilot medical, so make sure you don't miss this insider episode. Subscribe for free to the Aviator's Guide on YouTube or follow it on any podcast platform you use. While you're at it, do me a solid and like this video or rate and review my podcast. And if you need a refresher on the pilot medical, head back to listen to or watch episode 2, Should You Be a Pilot? Last episode, I covered Flight School Supplies Part 1. Today's episode is the second and final part. Who knew there is so much to discuss when it comes to supplies you need to become a pilot? If you haven't already listened to or watched episode 4, which is part 1, check it out now so that you don't miss out on any of the important supplies you need for flight school to make sure you're the most prepared pilot you can be. And just like I did for the last episode, I made a PDF link for all the supplies I will be talking about today. This PDF will include all the supplies I talked about in part 1 as well, and you can find that PDF link in the show notes. All right. Let's get into it. Back in episode 3, I mentioned a contraption called the View Limiting Device. And this device is meant to do just that, limit your view to only the instruments directly in front of you. The purpose of these is to give the pilot wearing them simulated instrument meteorological conditions, or IMC, obstructing the view of the actual visual horizon outside. These devices come in many forms, and using them is also referred to as being under the hood, because the very first variations of this was an actual large hood or visor obstructing your view. The 2 most common forms of the view limiting device are the foggles, which make the outside view look foggy, or the blockles, which completely block out the outside view. Any form of the view limiting device is fine, and you will need it for your private pilot license and your instrument rating. The private pilot license and instrument rating details are also covered in episode 3. So if you missed it, go check it out. One of the many actions you will have to do before every single flight is sump the fuel to make sure that you have good, usable fuel. When you do this, you'll be looking for any water, any debris, make sure that it's not hazy, and verify that it's the appropriate color, which will be blue or green while you're in flight school. To sump the fuel, you will need a fuel tester. Just like everything else, there are a lot of different types of fuel testers, but while you're in flight school, I recommend getting the tester that I put in the PDF, as you can sump multiple different kinds of aircraft with this one. It also has a small filter on the top to block any unwanted debris when pouring that fuel back into the tanks after sumping. Along with sumping the fuel before every flight, you will have to get a fuel gauge to make sure you know exactly how much fuel is in each tank. While all aircraft do have some sort of internal fuel gauge to indicate how much fuel you have left, depending on the aircraft, these may not be the most reliable. That's where having your own fuel gauge comes in handy, so you can measure it yourself and add fuel as needed. Most DPEs, or designated pilot examiners, will want to see you use a fuel gauge on your check ride as it's showing proper ADM, or Aeronautical Decision Making and Judgment. ADM is an acronym you'll be hearing all the time after starting flight school, so go ahead and store that one in your mind. When it comes to these fuel gauges, different aircraft require certain lengths of the gauges. I did find a universal gauge and I put the link to that in the PDF that I made, but I have never used it before. No matter who you are or where you're from, when you're flying, you're going to need a good pair of sunglasses to protect those peepers. Did you know that the less you protect your eyes from the sun, the greater chance you have of getting cataracts at an early age? I didn't until literally a couple weeks ago when my mom, who was a nurse for over 30 years, informed me of this. Thanks for the knowledge, Mama. You always teach me things. Even the FAA wants to harp on the importance of wearing sunnies, so they made a whole article about it, the link to which is in the show notes. In this article, they specify that it's better to use non-polarized sunglasses and that glasses with a green, gray, or brown tint can be more helpful. Check out that article for more details and then go get yourself a pair of cool pilot sunglasses. They're for safety and style. The next item is targeted at more vertically challenged pilots. Don't let your height affect how you see in the aircraft. Help yourself out and buy a seat cushion. I've had students of mine use these before to make sure they can see properly, and it can be a game changer, especially when learning how to land. You may have to sit in the aircraft first to get a feel for if you need one of these, but you can do that on your discovery flight. I haven't personally used any of the seat cushions I put in the PDF, but see if you think any of them would work for you. And if you are a pilot that uses a seat cushion, let me know which one you would recommend. Now, you can't go back to school without a cool new flight bag to put all your fancy gadgets in. There are all types of flight bags that you can use. Just make sure it can fit all of your stuff easily and that it's not too big so that you can smoothly take it in and out of the aircraft. My flight school chose to distribute rather large duffel bags with a shoulder strap, and they fit everything and then some, but they were a pain to carry. As soon as I became a flight instructor and contract pilot, I switched to a small backpack to fit all of my necessities such as iPad, headset, and snacks because no one wants a hangry pilot. What size flight bag you really need depends on how many books you buy. Yep, here it is, guys. You thought you made it all the way through the necessary flight supplies without talking about books. Well, here we go. Now, before I dive in and tell you all the books you're going to need for training, I want to let you know that you do not have to buy all of them. The vast majority of books you will need and use are free to download via the FAA website. That's right, free. There is no need to sacrifice your bank account or your back when it comes to carrying those books around. They can all fit right in your iPad. I know some of you probably prefer to have a physical copy of the book. And don't worry, I'm going to provide you all the links to the books if you want to buy them, but I'm also going to give you guys the links to the PDF versions on the FAA website. I myself am usually a physical book kind of lady, but in this instance, I prefer the PDFs. The reason for this is I upload all of the PDFs of the books and documents that I'm going to need into my ForeFlight, organize them in there, and then not only can I search words and phrases and highlight whatever I want, but I can bookmark important pages. Note that all the books and documents that you will need are already accessible in your ForeFlight at no additional charge above your subscription cost. You can find all of these in ForeFlight in the FAA Drive under the Documents tab. Using ForeFlight for all of your books is how I taught all of my students, as I believe it's the most efficient and beneficial way of dealing with them. In a future episode, I will go over more details about how I use ForeFlight to my advantage, including organizing books and documents, so keep your eye out for that. Unfortunately, not all the books that you need are available to download for free, so you will have to buy a few regardless. Let's first review the books that you will need to buy. All of these books and documents will be organized by license and rating, and you can find the links to all of them in the PDF that I made, and the link to that PDF is in the show notes. When it comes to the private pilot written exam prep, you will need that year's most current test prep book with the testing supplement, which includes figures that you're going to need to reference during the exam. There is also an app you can buy to help you study for the PPL written exam that I used myself, and it's called Private Pilot Prepware, and it's $10. For all the other exams, you will not need the test prep books because you should be using a website called Shepherd Air. But you may still want the testing supplement for each license and rating to help you study. Shepherd Air does have all of the necessary figures you will need from the testing supplements, but I just think it's easier to have a separate testing supplement book, and it's not very expensive. For each check ride, you're definitely going to want the oral exam guide book, except for the CFII rating. For that, you're going to want the PTS book, which stands for Practical Test Standards. One book that you may already have is your logbook. If you don't already have one, I put links to my favorite ones in the PDF that I made. Technically, you don't have to have a physical logbook. A lot of pilots these days use electronic logbooks. You can even log all of your hours and endorsements on ForeFlight. I use an electronic logbook myself, and it's called myflightbook.com, and it's free, but I still use my paper logbook. I like my paper logbook to back up my electronic logbook and vice versa. Those hours are too important to me to lose. You will understand one day. Another popular electronic logbook is called Log10 Pro, and it starts at $80 a year. But while you're a struggling student, maybe just check out myflightbook.com. All right, well, those are the only books you will have to buy. Everything else you can download for free. Now let's talk about other books and documents you're going to want to download for your studies. The FAR-AIM, aka the Pilot Bible. FAR stands for Federal Aviation Regulations. These are all rules pilots must follow. AIM stands for Aeronautical Information Manual. These are more like guidelines to help pilots with basic flight information, such as air traffic control procedures. Many students like to tab out their FAR-AIM to help them quickly find certain pages. So I included a link for these tabs as well so you can see what I'm talking about. I haven't purchased a FAR-AIM since I've been out of flight school, since I can easily update the FAR-AIM that's on ForeFlight. And it's updated automatically via the FAA website and ecfr.gov. Remember though, you don't have to buy the book and then tab it out. You can just use the ForeFlight features that allow you to search and bookmark the FAR-AIM. It's super helpful, and this is how I taught all of my students to utilize the FAR-AIM. And if you do decide that you want to buy a paper FAR-AIM, you will have to buy a new one every year. This is why the online versions that update automatically are generally more helpful. In addition to the FAR-AIM, you're going to need the PHAK, the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. This is just a basic core book that every pilot will reference and study at some point. There's also the Airplane Flying Handbook, which is another basic core book for pilot knowledge. The Aeronautical Chart User's Guide is your go-to to help you understand the sectional charts I talked about in Part 1, Episode 4. Any and every symbol that you will see on those sectional charts is explained in this document. The Aviation Weather Handbook covers, you got it, weather. It's just nice to have around to reference. Now, the next three books are for instrument pilots. The Terminal Procedures Publication, also known as the TPP, the Instrument Flying Handbook, and the Instrument Procedures Handbook. And lastly, all pilots will need the ACS, which stands for Airman Certification Standards for private pilot, instrument, commercial, and flight instructor. These will help you prepare for your check ride flight like nothing else. You want to make sure you become very familiar with this ACS before you go into your check ride. And that's because the ACS is literally an outline of what the DPEs are going to use to grade your check ride. And then remember, you want that PTS or Practical Test Standards to help you prepare for your CFII. Well, that's it. That's all the books, you guys. But there are also a bunch of other aviation books and documents out there that you're going to find and use along the way. Some documents you will inevitably reference at one point or another are called Advisory Circulars, or ACs. These are documents made by the FAA to cover specific topics in greater detail. A few examples of these are AC 91-74 Bravo, which is the Pilot's Guide for Flight and Icing Conditions, AC 60-22 for details on aeronautical decision-making, and AC 61-65 Hotel, which covers certifications for pilots and flight and ground instructors. Once y'all have got everything else, the very last bit of supplies that you may or may not need, depending on your flight school, are clothes for your uniform. This is really a Part 141 school thing, and the most that you would need to buy is maybe some black slacks, some new shoes, socks, and a belt. Your flight school will let you know if you have to wear certain clothing. At my flight school, if we didn't wear our uniform to a T, they would not let us fly our scheduled flight that day and charge us a cancellation fee. If you attend a flight school that requires uniforms, let me know what the policy is for y'all. All right, aviators, so there you have it. To sum up, you will need a headset, an iPad with the case and a stylus, ForeFlight, and a flight computer, a plotter, sectional charts, which are optional, navlogs, which you might need, a knee board, which is again optional, a view limiting device, a fuel tester, a fuel gauge, sunglasses, maybe an elevating cushion, a flight bag, books, and maybe a uniform. Now, I went and calculated how much all these supplies should cost for you guys if you chose only the most inexpensive items and bought only the required books, and that total came out to around $1,100. What if you bought the most expensive items and you still only bought the necessary books? That comes out to around $3,200. So either way, you should definitely not be spending what I did in flight school for your supplies. Now, I am confident that you guys should be thoroughly prepared for flight school after listening to and watching this episode and episode 4. If y'all think I missed anything, please let me know. Thanks so much for sticking with it, you guys, and for listening to the Aviator's Guide. Y'all are the best. Keep it up and make yourself the most prepared and best pilot you can be. And share this podcast with anyone you think it could help. Remember, I post every Friday. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like this video. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, please follow, rate, and review my show. Keep putting in the work, and y'all have an awesome weekend. See you later, aviators.